2019. On the side government, we have Days of Future Past. On the side opposition, we have Will We Blake. And my name is Ko. And judging with me, we have Kok Jun-Yi and Barry Lee. And the motion is the third one. So without any further ado, we now invite the Prime Minister to open the debate.
Panel, we believe very strongly that teenagers and children who aren't even of voting age should not bear the consequences of historic injustices caused by older generations against Mother Earth. Recognize that in an ideal world, we would help everybody to the greatest extent of our ability. But we do not live in a perfect world. We live in a world that is marked by political complications, by resource constraints, political and economic shortages of capital. The tendency, therefore, in the status quo is to tend towards palliative, short-term solutions, for example, turning to cloud seeding within your own domestic territories instead of resolving the structural problems of haze. For example, other countries engaging in extremely polluting practices like burning forests, or resorting to things like building dams and dikes instead of changing industry structures to turn away from very carbon-producing industries. We cannot achieve these kind of long-term structural changes, the kind of changes that we truly need on their side, where they continue to prioritize one generation over the other in a political, economic system that's heavily slanted against younger people. Let's be very clear. Their side already stands for this in the status quo, where governments today are constitutionally bound to preserve a certain proportion, in fact a significant proportion, of their national reserves for the future generation. What we're suggesting is that we expand this principle into the area that matters the most for us, the most pressing issue of climate change. 3 arguments. 1, on the moral imperative. 2, we benefit everyone, both younger and older generations. While my second speaker will talk about how we correct a fundamental misalignment of political interests. Let's talk about the first argument. And here I want to suggest that there is an overwhelming, undeniable moral imperative for several reasons that we should benefit the younger generations when it comes to such calculus. I have 3 structural reasons. My first reason is that the older generation, by and large, tends to be more culpable for the environmental conditions that we suffer today. Several reasons. 1, they tend to be the most politically complicit by the fact that many of them were many times voters, having lived generally much longer than a younger person. No thank you. Secondly, many of these older people tend to be in positions of power, so they themselves were often the very same people that made decisions that put in place environmentally polluted practices and industries. For example, massive industries that produce lots of carbon and increase and intensify global warming, causing rising sea levels. Third reason, precisely because of this, the older generation, by virtue of having been here a lot longer, also benefited the most from systems that polluted the environment. Basically, we suggest that the older generation, having put in place these systems that robbed the environment and robbed the world of its resources, were also the ones that stand to benefit the most. Let's note that even though they were the ones that benefited the most, that they were the ones who imposed a vast majority of the harms are still being borne disproportionately by younger generations who, we suggest by and large, weren't even alive at the point when these critical and crucial decisions about the economy were being made. Second moral imperative, we correct a massive asymmetry of power. Notice how that the vast majority of the decision-making apparatus in government tend to be older, more experienced political office holders. This means that very often, political decisions across a wide spectrum of economic, social, and environmental policies already, in very insidious ways, benefit elderly generations. For example, choosing to devote a lot more funding to welfare packages and pensions instead of supporting environmentally friendly options like turning towards renewable energy. This suggests that there is a moral imperative for the older generation to care more for the younger. The third moral imperative is because there is a greater responsibility for us as a state to future generations. And here I want to ask, what is the basic duty of a state? Yes, we recognize that states have an overwhelming duty to its citizens under its charge, but we suggest that we cannot adopt a presentist view of society. We cannot adopt a view that overly fetishizes people who are alive today, because the overriding interest of a state institution is one that is timeless. A state concerns people today, but more importantly, the countless generations who will live in this country in the future. Therefore, we suggest to you, panel, that states must also have a responsibility, an overwhelming one, to future generations. This means implementing policies that may be quite distasteful today, like investing more money, hold on a moment, in environmentally friendly practices at the cost of some economic damage, to ensure that children can grow up in a world where their homes are being flooded. Before we go on, yes?
If your main issue is with the asymmetric power of people who are comprised of the elite, how this statistical calculation solve that problem in any meaningful way?
So how will this statistical calculation really take place in the real world? This means when it comes to making political decisions, we suggest that economists, for example, can realize the trade-off of helping a younger person is a lot more optimal than helping an elderly person when it comes to making, say, deciding the allocation of funding. So clearly, I'm not entirely sure where the POI was directed at. But crucially, let's be very clear. We want to point out that the vast majority of the elderly generation, a significant number of them, actually support policies that privilege the young, because we're talking about their children. These are the children of elderly generations who are bearing the brunt. The reason why elderly generations are unlikely to take the first step to adopt this policy on our side is because the elderly tend to be a lot more politically conservative and take the lead from government institutions. What we're suggesting is not to go against the elderly, but to implement and initiate a policy from the government that people in general recognize benefits all of them. My second argument is that this policy benefits both the elderly and the young. Let's be very clear about this. In trying to solve issues like climate change or detrimental environmental conditions, we're looking for structural, forward-looking solutions. The question is the elderly generation or the younger one more likely and more suited to take on these solutions? I suggest it's the younger, for two structural reasons. The first is because the younger generation, by virtue of having a much longer time to live in this world, are generally a lot more invested in their livelihoods. So there's already a natural incentive, a natural self-preservatory incentive for young people to consider options moving forward. This means considering more innovative solutions, like green technology, instead of relying on past relics, like coal plants, that tend to be incredibly environmentally disastrous. The second structural reason is also because younger generations, by virtue of their capital in terms of age, political capital, or their energy, are a lot more willing to take risks. I suggest that one of the biggest reasons why we are moving a society towards things like renewable energy is because there are massive entry barriers to it. The argument here is this: younger generations are more likely to overcome this entry barrier because they are a lot more able to take risks. They have a lot more capital, they have a lot more time to make mistakes, they're a lot more exposed to new and innovative solutions in school, for example, or the access to the internet and ideas like these. Okay, so opposition is probably going to say something like, but we can wait for the younger generation to come into power. No, what they fail to recognize is that matters of environment are time-sensitive and irreversible. The moment that glacier melts, there is no way we can freeze it again. The moment your coastal village is inundated in floodwaters and lives are lost, there is no way we can turn back time. This is the reason why it's so important and so imperative for this policy to take place now. I'm so proud to stand on the proposition.
Thank you for the speech. We now invite leader of the opposition.
A younger life is more valuable than an older life when you're trying to decide who to help and who to hurt with your environmental policy. We think that insofar as you want to use a statistical life metric, you should be achieving a better valuation. Before I go on to my rebuttals, I will counter policy. 3 prongs for you. Firstly, what do we want? We are going for the status quo definition of statistical life, where basically we're calculating the willingness to pay for a decrease in risk of your mortality, calculated through things like the medical procedures you pay for, your health checkouts, balance or average across your lifespan. In any case, math aside, the point is that our metric is that saving an older life does not have less value than saving a younger life, whereas they think that saving a younger life just has more economic value. How is this applied? Second prong. We are going to use this metric, right, for environmental policies that can impact human lifespans. Things like coal mining that can pollute the water and the air of a certain area. Things like piping systems. Things like whether you want to build factories that release asbestos and where you want to do it. Okay, it also applies not only these negative policies, but also positive environmental policies like green technology, testing out clean energy sources, and so on. But the main point really is we're trying to decide, is it worth it to apply this policy? Is it worth it to use this policy in a certain area of the country? Third prong of my policy. Given that then, right, what is going to happen outside? What are our priorities? So they would therefore try and benefit young people more and hurt old people more. What would we do? Basically, when it comes to policies that could end up hurting the environment and thereby hurt people, we will prioritize sparser areas, areas with fewer people, which makes sense when you calculate how much value of human life is affected there. When it comes to positive policies that help the environment get better and therefore help people, we want to put it in, like, say, density areas where more people therefore benefit, regardless of whether you're young or old, with no discrimination between age. Before I go to my substantives, some quick rebuttals. So firstly, they came and talked to us about a moral imperative. The key thrust of this is that the young cannot be hurt by the sins of the old because the old destroyed the environment. One, that is not true, right? We think that young people today, with their use of many modern means, vehicles, whatever, that hurt the environment so much, have done a lot in a very short span of time to also hurt the environment. Furthermore, we would say that in many places, the elderly have also grown the country's economy to the point where we have the money to implement positive environmental measures. In any case also, I think this is super unfair, because the debate is about what policy a government should implement, and not about the individual old person on the street who has done no wrong and has not actually installed any policies from the past 60 years till now. They came to say, well, we think these old people are politically complicit because they voted these guys into power. Okay, then let's quibble a bit, right? What then do you do about the poor old guy who never voted for the ruling party that put in these bad measures? What I'm trying to tell you is that their metric is wrong. When the environment affects everybody, this idea that the old people have done more simply cannot be the moral metric that you judge by. Furthermore, your current government, your government was elected right here, right now, should be dealing with current problems and not trying to attribute blames for past wrongs. On to my second rebuttal, on this caricature of the old versus the young. Look, the old are not people who don't care about the environment at all. We posit they care just as much as the young. Why? Because the old people also want to maximize their lifespan, especially when they have worked all their lives and just want to enjoy life now. Secondly, the old want to leave a legacy behind and do not want to doom the younger people who they have raised and they have seen grow up. Furthermore, when you do things that screw over the environment, when you allow these policies, the old people do feel the direct impact. They can feel the rising temperatures, they can feel the increased dust and smog in that area, so they also support good environmental policies and measures. Furthermore, we also realize, right, that things like climate change denial affect both the young, the middle-aged, and the old, so we just can't see this extra complexity or moral culpability on the part of one generation. Let's go on now to my substantives. I have two things to talk about, and the rest of my rebuttals are merged within. So first thing, why is the value of life not evaluated by age or by the generation you come from? 4 reasons. Firstly, we think that quality of life is just simply more important, right, than how long you live or which year of your life that you are in. Second thing, we realize, right, look, old people are physically more vulnerable and therefore more susceptible to things like haze, like smog, right, like pollution. Therefore, we think this, insofar as we talk about state responsibility, our response is state responsibility is meant to protect people who are not able to help themselves, i.e. the old people. The state is supposed to protect people who will suffer the most environmental damage, right? So therefore, that's precisely why we do things like spend more on healthcare and pensions. That's why we also look out for vulnerable parties and disabled. We therefore think it is fair for the government to not deprioritize old people. Third reason, we think that old people inherently have value in our community. Culturally, we think that is the case as how people see it, but also we think they've given society all their lives. So it's not about moral culpability. It's that we should be grateful towards them and therefore not deprioritize them once a policy may hurt them. Lastly, we also believe, right, that in the moment, everybody gets old. Which, actually, I'll go to that later. I'll take a
Rising sea levels takes decades, even centuries to fully materialize. Do you think the current generation will feel it more, or your children will?
Right, so that's not what the debate is about, right? So there are rising sea levels now that will get worse in 100 years. Right now, we want to do things to stop rising sea levels and not make current impacts feel worse. We should prioritize, therefore, everybody population so they don't feel worse right now. In 100 years, that also stays the same. So we look at it as a point in time and not as future projections. Also, let's talk about the idea that state is not timeless, right? So regarding how the state is timeless, everybody gets old, right? We think it sets a bad long-term policy precedence that as long as you are old, we are going to screw you over. We think that's morally wrong as well. On then to my second substantive, why this ineffective environmental policy and their response to the idea on their side on how to save future generations. Firstly, on an intrastate level, there are some areas that tend to have more older people, right, in a country. You are going to screw over these areas by allowing more environmental damage to run rampant there. I think that's terrible because you can't reverse a lot of damage, the land being infertile and so on. So essentially, you have closed off parts of your nation to becoming completely damaged by environmental disasters. Second thing, on an interstate level, often countries with aging populations tend to be more developed or industrialized societies. Japan, Singapore, China, to name a few. What is going to happen? They are the ones that are going to decrease political will to believe in environmentalism or environmental policies. Therefore, they are the ones that actually make old people less responsible with technology. But secondly, we realize that countries, right, will not want to do things like take action to stop environmental damage because they think that the world doesn't care for them because they have more old people. Therefore, we think we're the ones that actually solve the environment on a metric that is far more morally acceptable. I'm extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech. We now invite Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
So what we saw from the previous speaker is basically them hiding behind the status quo, saying that we will have equal value placed on the young and old. But what we told you from first speaker is that this statistical equality has not translated to actual equality in terms of political representation. That's the crucial frame we brought to you in first speaker that they are not listening to, right? The fact that currently a present-centric focus that supposedly views all individuals as equal actually benefits older individuals on the ground because you focus on things like stopgap measures, things like retrospective measures like cloud seeding, as opposed to solving the fundamental root cause of stopping forest fires, for instance. So you can't just hide behind the statistical equality here and say that politically it translates to that. That's why on our side, what we need to do is to tilt the balance back towards protecting the young individuals who are actually harmed, because there is no political pinch to politicians if they focus on the old behind the veneer of statistical equality. So one housekeeping matter, right? So they told us that they will also have green tech developments that can protect both of them. So I'll point out to you that it's actually mutually exclusive. So you can't actually have green technology and also focus on the old in their policies for a few structural reasons. The first, as we told you, is that there are monetary constraints. So obviously there are resource constraints that mean that we can't focus on every single effort. At some point we have to prioritize one individual, and we think it's a moral crime to prioritize the people who are culpable for the current problems that we are facing. The second structural reason is that given that we are living in a climate of climate change denialism, when people are fatigued with the climate change efforts, they don't see a need to continue fighting. That's when political capital is extremely finite, which means we can't divert all attention and all political capital on all kinds of efforts. We have to divert it towards ones that protect the long term. And third, because you think that the older people become, the more accustomed they are to an environment that is deteriorating, which means that they become more defeatist. That's why the vast majority of people who support Trump and his claim that climate change is a hoax are old people, because they have become accustomed, become fine with the fact that climate change is a problem, and they have become accustomed to the harmful effects of climate change. We think comparatively, young individuals are fine with that. That's why we think the vast majority of people who are supporting climate change efforts are millennials who have very little tolerance for the harmful effects of the environment that governments have neglected. The last reason for this is the time sensitivity that we currently need to change our focus currently, because green technology has a long runway, which means that startup needs to be done now to a greater degree to ensure that in the long term we actually get more support for the entire industry to be built. So what we heard from the previous speaker was that government should focus on present problems and not backward problems. I'd like to clarify that we are not actually focusing on backward issues. We are focusing on forward-looking problems. Things like how the environment is deteriorating for the young generation, all of which were caused by the old generation. So two main arguments here. First, about how our policy is morally justified. No, thank you. Secondly, on the practical benefits. So first, on how it's morally justified. We had a few responses to the first argument we brought to you, right? The first thing is they say that young people also hurt the environment. That is simply untrue, but even if you think about it on a numerical level, right? The lifespan of a 12-year-old as compared to the lifespan of a 60-year-old, the amount of damage can be accrued on a daily basis by consuming more plastic bags, more plastic bottles, is far greater for a 60-year-old as opposed to a 12-year-old. So, Like on a numerical level, this is just wrong. The second thing we heard from them is that the average old person is not complicit. Like first response, this is just not true. We have lobby groups funded by people like the Koch brothers, people who are old, who are rich, who are funding climate change denialism. But to let's take them on the best case. So let's talk about people, old people who did not vote for these policies. It does not matter if you did not vote for these policies, if you directly benefited from the fact that these policies were passed anyway. So old people generally benefited from things like industrialization, they built entire economic livelihood out of these harmful environmental policies. We think that alone makes them complicit. Just as we make the same argument for things like reparation debates, for instance. So we think that all individuals are complicit even if they did not directly vote for these policies. They at least sustained it and were benefiting from it. The third reason why we think that young people deserve more moral consideration is the fact that they are far more in danger than as opposed to an old individual. So let's talk about a 12-year-old, right? The prolonged exposure you have to harmful carcinogens in the like atmosphere, things like climate change, like breathing in like toxic fuels or like pollutive substances, is far more detrimental to a young individual who has a lower immune system, who is far more able to be exposed to this over like the course of their entire life, as opposed to an old individual who is like 50 years old and who only has 10 years of exposure to all of these harms. Before I go on, yes.
Do you think old people who remember better climate and environment are less likely to be okay with the current deteriorating climate?
No, I don't think so, because the fact is that like this is a gradual process of the government, of the environment getting bad. So they become accustomed over the 50 years of their life, they become okay with the fact that rising sea levels are a thing. As compared to young individuals who suddenly see like the difference, who suddenly see how terrible it can become in the future because they've not actually experienced the harmful effects and become accustomed to all of these things. So like back to what I was talking about, right? They say that old people may not support like these drastic changes in these policies. We think that it's just like simply not true because we actually get more buy-in on our side. Because we think that if you have structural change, which is what you get on our side, right? A structural shift to green technology, you actually make this a more conciliatory approach because you tell people that it's not a zero-sum game, you can actually have jobs and also still protect the environment. As compared to on their side, we have a current present-centric focus where they essentially have this incremental changes like cutting greenhouse emissions. But this actually is bad because it decreases buy-in for policies. Because now you're telling them that when you cut greenhouse emissions, you actually harm coal workers who lose their jobs. As compared to a structural shift to greenhouse technology that actually shows a more conciliatory approach that gets more actual buy-in. So the second main clash in this debate is about how we better combat climate change. And here's where we had heard far fewer responses from the previous speaker. Because what we told you is that even if it seems that we are benefiting young people now, it's actually more likely that policies that benefit young people benefit old people as well, as compared to policies that benefit old people not benefiting young individuals. Because what we told you is that policies that benefit young individuals have a long-term view of the impacts that will be caused, and it's not true that it's not true that just because they are long-term in nature, the effects and the benefits that are only reaped in the long term. Because we think that if you have green technology, for instance, you have cleaner air now, you have cleaner waters now, all of which benefits old people as well in the future. So the crucial difference is this: on our side, when we focus on young individuals, we can actually benefit all of society, including old individuals as well, because all of the benefits that are reaped benefit all individuals. As compared to on your side, when you focus only, like, even if you say statistically on both individuals, realistically it's only on older individuals, and that means that you directly harm younger individuals who are not going to be benefited by our policies. We also told you about how we have structural root causes taken out, so things like how forest fires are a problem, that's actually structurally taken out as opposed to stopgap measures like cloud seeding, all of which also benefits people on the ground. For all of these reasons, we stand very firmly in proposition.
Thank you for the speech. We now invite the yellow here.
A bunch of things I want to say, but the first of which is I'm quite surprised you don't actually understand what statistical life means and what it actually does for policy making. Marvin's a doctor, I would expect him to know better. Firstly, there's no trade-off between environmental protection and using the current estimates of the value of life. Let me explain. What is a statistical life? It means the amount of money you are willing to spend to save a life. It's not about quality of life, it's about saving a life. It's about the difference between you dying and you not dying. So, if you are willing to spend 7 million on a young person to save the rest of their life in case they got a really bad accident or something, that's what we call statistical life, right? And that policy, so on our side, the value of saving a young life is 7 million. The value of saving an old life, 7 million. On their side, The value of saving a young life, 7 million. The value of saving an old life, 1 million. Why does this matter? Because if the trade-off that you want to talk about is about the trade-off between environmental protection and economic policy, implementing economic policy doesn't save life. Implementing environmental protection policies save life. Consequently, it is in our best interest for anyone who wants to protect the environment to value the life of an elderly person at 7 million as opposed to 1 million. Because when you save people, when you save the environment, you save young people, you save old people. So if you count both of them equally at 7 million, the total value of life saved is greater. But on their side, they will reduce the value of life of an old person. Why? I don't fucking know. So that's the reason why there isn't a trade-off between environmental protection and current estimates of a value of life. Their analysis only works if in economic policy we save lives. But that's not the trade-off we're looking at. So it's fine. You see, we are the ones who save more life by valuing elderly people's lives at a higher rate. So that's the first reason why there is no trade-off. And that's the reason why 14 minutes of speeches on their side make no sense. Because nobody bothered to explain how statistical estimates actually work out in detail in determining policy. Right? That's all they said was, oh, there's a trade-off between young and old people, but they manufactured this trade-off. But obviously, I'm not going to spend 7 minutes ranting about the fact that they don't understand statistics and policy. I'm going to assume there is a trade-off between young and old people, and I'm going to tell you why we ought to treat everybody equally anyway, right? The fake debate we always wanted. Firstly, old people matter just as much. So if we decided to value every single person's life based on how many years they had left to live, or how much it would cost to save their life, or how much utility we could get out of their lives, we would have euthanized autistic people a long time ago, or people with severe disabilities, or people in comas, or people who suffer from rare diseases and who could have a normal standard of living, but only if we spend several hundred thousands of dollars to overcome their conditions. That's fucking nonsense, right? Clearly, we value people who are uniquely vulnerable in society, who require more amount of money to be able to live the same lives that we do, not because we value them based on how little they cost in order for us to keep them alive, or how much utility we can get out of them, but whether we find that every human life deserves equal dignity, and whether our duty is to protect the most vulnerable members of our society, because that is the hallmark of a civilized society. By that logic, it means that I should prioritize a 25-year-old Chinese or Japanese person more than I would prioritize a 70-year-old Japanese person. Never mind the fact that they all live to around 90 anyway. We should fuck them. Everyone, we should pull away money from healthcare spending, let them all die, and focus it on education instead. It's fucking nonsense. So clearly, we need to understand that old people matter just as much as young people do, because they are uniquely vulnerable and because of basic principles of human dignity. Next thing, old people are apparently to blame for our current environmental woes. My response is bullshit. Why? Because the average person on the ground, old or young, doesn't have a clue just how much each choice contributes to the harms caused to the environment. Because a lot of these problems are due to industrial policy, the ability of governments to bend regulations at the whims and fancies of lobbyists, so that factories are located right beside rivers in various parts of India, and then everyone dies because of pollution. That's the sort of systemic, corporate-led, regulatory capture that is present in our system. That's what's to blame. You want to blame someone? Go blame the companies. Don't blame ordinary people who didn't know any better, who don't have this level of education or sophistication. Frankly, even with my university degree, no one knows exactly what's going to happen in terms of environmental policy at the micro level. No one knows that me buying clothes from Uniqlo, or her or him buying clothes from Zara or Mango is going to destroy the environment due to fast fashion. The reality is that people, old and young, are A, ignorant, therefore not responsible, and more importantly, B, not any more or less responsible based on their age for the harm they cause to the environment. Because by that logic, we should all crucify ourselves as young people for watching fuck tons of Netflix and consuming so much power in our society, consuming far more electrical power than any other generation has previously, and consuming far more fast fashion. So we should all screw ourselves over. But clearly that's not the case, so this is nonsense. The next thing I want to talk about is about how the distribution of costs matter. Let's assume environmental policy is important, more important than economic development. But the costs of implementing environmental policy don't fall evenly on people, right? So for example, in the short term, for unavoidable environmental costs, You know, for now we have to still use coal. We've got to put that coal processing plant somewhere and like pollute the environment surrounding it. Like their side is going to prioritize like areas where elderly people predominate because they believe that elderly people's lives matter less than young people. Let's screw them over despite the fact that they are more uniquely like susceptible to lung disease. Let's screw them over, let's kill them, right? That was very substantive, that was not responded to. No thank you. More importantly, like in the long term, like it's about political will as well. What do I mean by this? So I think they seem to live under the delusion that just because the EPA decides to play around with statistical values of people's lives and therefore paint certain costs of certain policies in a positive light for environmental policy and a negative light for economic policy, people will vote for them. That's fucking nonsense, guys. Because as you see, if word comes out that like an environmental agency, an arm of the government, systemically reduces the value, the estimated value of human life of the elderly, then, as we say, in aging societies, the elderly voting bloc, which is a significant voting bloc, is simply not going to pass policies through. So you will get better so-called estimates of like the costs of environmental policy or economic policy on old people and young people, but that's not going to translate into actual changes in policy because you're never going to get that at the ballot box. That is truly unfortunate. We are the side that knows that we can't afford to piss off old people. We are the side that obviously is not going to prioritize the lives of old people over young people, but we want to make sure we strike the right balance, and we are going to translate those statistical outcomes into actual policy victories. That's why you should vote.
Thank you for the speech. We have to invite Marvin to here.
Opposition's burden of proof is to defend the status quo. They failed to tell us why the status quo is okay. The status quo is heavily influenced by their equal weightage in appearance policy, but we are willing to argue that even though it's equal weightage in appearance, substantially it is heavily tilted towards the older generation. People who have been here for a longer period of time with greater financial resources, people who have like greater political leverage in the system. How have they shaped the world today, and how have they led to, like, for example, environment degradation and the inability to build up green technology to protect our future? A few ways. Firstly, in terms of lobby groups. We need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that if OP wants to defend the status quo, OP also has to defend a status quo whereby, like, for example, the voting adults, the older generations, they are voting, like, for example, they are using the lobby groups to pressure the Trump government, for example, to keep all these coal mining industries alive. What is important is that whether or not we really need coal mining industries, given that now we have natural gas and so on and so forth, is a matter of debate, and this debate may very well be informed by the kinds of statistics that we're talking about. And this debate is about whether or not we need to inflate the importance, like, for example, of the protection of the young people, so that statistically speaking, the economist has a fighting chance against all these lobby groups to begin with. This debate also takes place in the climate, whereby, yes, I want to defend my parents, but I have to say that my parents are also culpable for, like, for example, funding research when it comes to climate change denial, right? They spend millions of dollars into, like, scientific research trying to, like, conflate the picture and say that, look, that the global temperature is rising not because of, like, carbon emissions, or like water levels are rising and only in some areas but not the other area, or to, like, for people like Trump to say that because winter is really cold in one particular area, therefore climate change must be a hoax to begin with. This is extremely damaging and it tilts the information asymmetry heavily against the young people. That is why there's another reason why, when it comes to statistical analysis, we need to inflate those figures so that at least the young people are being represented there. When Adil came up here in a half-awoken state and talked about how statistical analysis is about a panel of people sitting in front of a computer and deciding that, okay, this person is 7 million, this person is 9 million, therefore we click a button and then we decide that the person who is worth 7 million dies. That is not. This debate more looks like, for example, economists or environmentalists going in front of Congress, where Congress has multiple issues, yes, to represent multiple constituents, and that there are many factors or considerations outside of environmental issues to begin with. That's why we are not being really that ageist here, because we are using this as one factor of a multifactorial analysis. That the economist is able to justify that, for example, we need to cut down on carbon emissions. We need to do the politically unfavorable thing, to start green technology, even though it involves heavy capital influx, even though it involves, for example, a long-term project that may not be politically favorable at this point in time. That is the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, we need to realize that we need to inflate those numbers, because the status quo, even though they claim that it's equal weightage in appearance, is not equal weightage in substance. And this has huge implication as to how this debate is going to be run. Because the strongest argument coming here today is that we should not prioritize one group over the other. But if you are going by the status quo, you don't defend the status quo, you don't characterize the status quo, you are not doing anything about the status quo, and the status quo is heavily tilted towards the older people or people who are voting, then to some extent it defeats your own argument, because in the absence of any action, the old people are being prioritized. Now all your arguments about how we shouldn't prioritize one group over the other falls back on its own. But proposition is the team that is courageous. We are doing two things. The first thing is that we are recognizing that there is an asymmetry that exists, and there's a backlog of 20, 30 years of political lobbying, and that we want to equal the playing field. And proposition is also courageous enough to say that even if we are not precise in our calculation, that we overcompensate, that somehow as a consequence that the young people will therefore become more heavily prioritized, we are willing to stand by that because of all the principal justification that Slow talked about. For example, in terms of culpability. Guys, we are not punishing the old people, but we are saying that in comparison, the young people are relatively a lot more innocent. Guys, we are not saying that old people don't die from pneumonia or asthma. We are saying that if you are exposed to 60 years compared to 5 years of smoke, that you are more probably going to die from asthma if you are a young person. Guys, again, it's not about quality of life versus quantity of life. We are saying that quality of life, considering all things equal, if you are going to have a bad quality of life for the next 5 years versus 50 years, we will defend the side that has a longer period of time. So all these moral arguments dissolve itself. The point of dignity again is I don't know what you're standing for, because if you are not doing anything and you prioritize the older people, then you are also neglecting the dignity of the younger people. But I'm willing to argue that the dignity of the younger people is very important, because ultimately they are going to be here for a longer period of time, they have been hurt, they are more vulnerable, and more importantly, you need to think about this. In a comparative analysis, who can really defend themselves against environmental threats? Is it the rich adult who has money to own a house, to drive to an area away from coastal areas and resettle in the country where it's environmentally more friendly? Or is it a poor person who's trying to pay off their student debt and does not have as much mobility when it comes to this kind of thing? Even when it comes to defending your own dignity, if you really have to choose one over the other, I'm sorry we have to err on the side of the younger people. But this debate is also about who is going to be more constructive. We need to understand that because of the problems of the status quo, that there is a sense of defeatism that happens over here. In answering that POI that they mentioned over here, there is a condition of learned helplessness, which is you know that climate change is a problem. But after a long period of time of living in there for a long period of time, and you realize that you can't do anything about it, sometimes you will revert to the state where you say that, guys, I'm just going to be here for the next 10 years. This really is not going to matter as much anymore. And that's why I'm not willing to support green technology. We talk about how green technology is extremely important, that budgets are underfunding green technology for 3 structural reasons. Firstly, that because there's a great inertia, it's a collective action problem, right? That the benefits of coal mining is immediate, but the harms of for example, pneumonia or asthma is not immediately visible. What we need to break in this case is the collective action problem by having a first mover's advantage for someone to break it and to start to invest in it. But it involves a lot of persuasion to Congress. And you're not going to persuade Congress right now using a status quo because we have failed to do so. We need to try another tactic whereby the economist is able to show statistics about how now that we are representing young people with greater statistical priority, that therefore economically it may be justifiable to go for this green technology. Green technology is also important because it requires a time lag. We need to start now. We can't postpone this problem to the future. And by the way, if you think about it, by the time you postpone to the future, the young people become older, the same sense of learned helplessness will hit them as well. It will mean that ultimately no one will solve this problem. I dare to say that a team that is going to lead us to the end of our existence probably doesn't deserve to win this debate.
Thank you. for the speech. We now invite opposition leader. Yeah.
Two clarifications to make about the strange case shift on the third prong. Two things. One, this debate cannot take place in a world where nothing is done in status quo, where people are absolutely ignorant. Because if that were true, all of the policy measures on their side will have no political will have no people supporting them, and will have no changes that will actually happen. Therefore, propositions arguments cannot, and ops arguments cannot take place in that context, because this debate is not about that context. Therefore, all of their arguments about why the status quo is bad cannot be valued highly in this debate anyway. What is this debate more likely about? Okay, second thing I want to say is that climate change is not a specific type of plague or virus like the predator who looks out for people who are old and or looks out for people who are young and selectively targets them. Climate change does not discriminate based on how old you are. Climate change affects everyone. That is an undisputable premise, and that's not something that they can claim. They cannot say it's a selective problem, therefore only selective people obtain the solution to climate change. This therefore means that this debate must take place in a context where things are actively being done about status quo and people actively do care about the environment. The question becomes, how should the EPA, a fundamental organization that dictates environmental policy, how should it statistically value certain things over others? And therefore, I have two things I'm going to talk about in this debate. Number one, is there a principal justification that needs to be done about this policy? And secondly, can we place responsibilities on specific groups? But before that, just a couple of rebuttals that stand out, right? We think the status quo is pretty fine actually, because young and old, contrary to popular belief, are actually taking part in climate change. Elderly politicians like Bernie Sanders, for example, do care about these things. If you look at the funding that's done towards environmental causes, most of it comes from, surprise, surprise, old people like Bill Gates, like other billionaires who actually do genuinely care about the environment. Because surprise, surprise, over the past 40 years, they've actually been feeling the effects of rising temperatures. Surprise, surprise, they've been feeling the effects of rising sea levels, and those are things that they actively, viscerally see. It is absolutely ridiculous for them to claim that old people don't know about these things going on. Secondly, on their side of the house, they need to deal with convincing the status quo that old people are solely responsible and that the young don't care. When the EPA does this, how do you think they're going to actively convince Congress, or by extension, political individuals, to actually vote in favor of environmental policies when an entire segment of the population is being blamed for the ignorance? Marvin talks about a collective action problem, but he ignores the fact that the solution to the collective action problem also means that you must also have the will of everyone voting in favor of you. When a collective part of the population is being blamed for the disaster, and therefore to that, look guys, you need to bear the burden and you need to accept responsibility, we don't think all of the measures that you talk about is actually going to be effective. Political will is essentially lost, an idea that Huiyi and Adil talked about, but they don't actually respond to, because all of their arguments are unrealistic to what is going on in status quo. This therefore, on our side, is more effective when congressmen, for example, tell you that climate change is not a problem that's done by the young or the old, but that it affects everyone, and therefore everyone should pitch in terms of environmental policy. That's a far more sellable line versus congressmen going up to Congress and saying that, look guys, we think old people are the ones who cause climate change, therefore we think we should prioritize the young over the old. Guess what congressmen are? Guess who politicians are? Politicians are also old people. If they are really saying that the very people creating denying climate change are the ones implementing economic policy, all of their measures are not going to work. Therefore, this case is an extremely unrealistic and disgusting case coming up from them. So, is there a principal justification? The only principal justification they have is a weird moral imperative that the old created all of these problems. This argument only works if you think that all old people were villains who voted against the environment in years past. This is not true, because all of proposition's claims, right, about changing the environment is about arguments for why people in power make decisions. Statistically, changing the way EPA thinks about these things does not change this problem. It only changes the way in which old people think about how they should politically participate. Because at the point in time where one side of the population is blamed for those problems, those individuals are not going to be politically willing to vote for people who are proposing environmental policies, because they'll think that my politician is not going to care about my area, because my area is not going to have cloud seeding. My area is going to allow corporations to continue building infrastructure and manufacturing plants which continue to affect me. Therefore, older people on their side, because they don't just disappear, right? Their actual voting population, surprise, surprise, those individuals are going to vote against economic policies of their side of the house when it becomes clear that an EPA as an organization statistically values these individuals' lives as being significantly less valuable. Therefore, the moral imperative that they're talking about actually, one, does not exist, and two, does not actually lead to political will. No thank you. The second thing, right, can we place responsibilities on specific groups? They tell us that you can't have green policies and also focus on the old. This is not a false dichotomy. Other points this out which we hear no response to. They are the ones who are forcing the trade-off between having economic policies and only implementing it towards one section of the population. On outside the house, we focus on areas regardless of whether you're young or old. This is something that Huiyi talked about, right? She's talking about how you try to spread this out. They try to poo-poo this by saying, oh, it's about resource allocation. Yes, it's about resource allocation, it's about distributing that resources equally amongst people regardless of how old you are, right? That's the point of the debate. The next thing that they claim, right, is that this weird claim that young people are super, performatively woke about environmental policies and the old people are not. You know who else is old and middle-aged? Politicians. Propositions literally saying that the group of people who can make change are old and therefore are responsible. When there's a line of logic coming up from their side of the house, right, how willing are you to buy that political will is actually going to happen when you're literally accusing large sections of the population for causing a problem? That is why, in terms of breaking the deadlock, right, our side is saying that old people are not solely responsible, their side is saying that old people are solely responsible. How do you break the deadlock? We think you break the deadlock on outside the house when we say that climate change is not a gender, it's not an age-specific problem, it's a problem that affects everyone. We think that's far more effective as a line of logic to get people to care on the problem of climate change. Because notice that young people are equally culpable in damaging the environment. To give them the best case, it may be true that old people, for example, have perhaps damaged the environment because they've lived longer, but the degree of damage that they have caused is arguable, right? Because you can't really quantify that. Given that you can't actively quantify specifically how much damage is done, it's far more effective for climate change, individuals or politicians, to say that this is not a unique problem, but this is a problem that everyone needs to deal with at the end of the day. Why is this more effective than their side of the house? At the point in time when you tell people that one group can be statistically more significant than the other, you effectively lose the interest of that group in fighting for those causes. That also therefore means that in aging populations, especially where older people make up large voting populations, you one, never get political will, two, you don't have any moral imperative because you've lost your moral high ground as politicians and as organizations, and three, who else uses these statistics? Adil talks about how corporations can use the EPA regulations to justify putting asbestos plants near places where elderlies live. This also affects corporations and how they value lives as well, and therefore it's ineffective in terms of getting people to care about climate change. At the end of the day, don't buy the unrealistic paradigm your proposition lives in. We think it's important to protect people regardless of whether they're young or old. I'm very, very proud to propose this.
So the only thing worse than fighting for a dystopia is fighting for a dystopia that doesn't actually work or do anything for the environment. I have 2 points for you. Firstly, why is team proposition screwing over old people? Secondly, why are they screwing over Mother Earth? So first on old people. So Marvin came to tell us, right, oh, we don't want to punish old people, but young people are more innocent. Look, so for instance, under that paradigm, in a suburban district that is graying, factories with lots of carbon emissions, we will build them there. When there's a coal factory there making things so much more unhealthy, we will not close it down. When we have green technology, we will put it in a younger city or a younger district. They are punishing old people because old people are feeling the terrible impacts of everything concentrated upon the areas where they live and where they work and where they do everything in their lives. Then they came out with a very convenient justification, a convenient bogeyman description of old people. Oh, but they ruined the environment first. I find it an abhorrent justification. Why? Because number one, it is your young people, your current generation, that has increased plane travel, increased power use, more factories due to the higher consumption. I don't really see why old people are suddenly the villains that make everything wrong to start with. Furthermore, we realize that many old people, as established by online speakers, have an incentive to vote in the right direction towards environmental preservation because, as we mentioned, they have seen the kind of changes that happen over time and recognize that we must stop it. Furthermore, unlike what they mischaracterize it as, old people don't think, I only have about 10 more years, let's burn everything down before I die. No, right, because they have family and young friends left behind, and therefore they want to ensure the world is still surviving after they leave it behind. Therefore, we think we're the ones that really do better that's why we think that morally, you shouldn't sideline old people. But Now let's assume that we haven't won that clash, though I think we did. Let's assume it's a complete deadlock as to whether old people deserve to be punished or not. How then do we break the deadlock? Two ways. Firstly, right, let's point out the fact, as I mentioned in my speech, that old people are incredibly vulnerable members of society. Right? They came and told us about evil old people refusing to vote in the correct direction, like burning trees, starting up factories. I will tell you, this debate is not about that kind of old people. They don't look like that, right? What do old people look like? This is your old auntie in the neighborhood who like collects cardboard boxes in the stifling heat born of climate change, who then goes back home to her non-air conditioned house and swelters in that oppressive heat. These are the people that the government should protect and not deliberately leave behind. But second, right, so let's say we don't want to break the deadlock, I will put to you that we win anyway. Why? Because then let's make our stakeholder Mother Earth, my second clash. What is our paradigm? We want to minimize the bad impacts and maximize the good impacts of our policy. That's why we go for population density instead, and that's where we think that our metric leads to. We think that their side is therefore, right, will degrade parts of the country irrevocably because they only focus good efforts on areas that younger people, so areas with more old people get completely destroyed, and therefore you lessen parts of the country that are environmentally protected or viable. We also think, right, that on their side, as I've mentioned, countries with aging populations basically will not want to participate in transnational environmental initiatives. Why would they bother? Why would Singapore say, I no longer want to import sand from Cambodia and therefore ruin Cambodia? Because no one cares about haze coming to my country, because my country's people are largely old, right? Something I mentioned in my first speech that nobody ever responded to. What is going to happen on their side? At the end of the day, they say, I guess we'll make cloud seeding happen. And it's a bit weird, right? First they said they wanted a good voter base, then they said we recognize unpopular. So I'm not sure they actually know whether they can make cloud seeding happen or get voted in or not. So at worst, right, I don't actually know where they will get all these votes from. We have already alienated old people and dismissed them as incapable for voting for environmental policies. But at best, right, on their side, say the vote passes, which areas will get cloud seeding? Only areas that have a younger population, younger cities, and so on. Right? So we think that's a problem. But we think more importantly, right, the government should put all voters and all people as its priority and not punish you for what you were voting for last time. Because the current government must solve current problems for the entire current population. I'm therefore extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech. We now invite Marvin to reply. Okay,
Panel, it's quite disappointing really that the only thing that's being butchered even more mercilessly in the environment is our case. Let's be very clear about something. Their side does not stand for statistical equality. What they really stand for is substantive equality. And at the point at which all three of our speakers have compellingly showed you that statistical equality does not result in equal opportunities and protection for both young and old people, we win this debate. Our argument was far more nuanced than they were willing to be generous. We told you that the processes by which statistics are calculated are so weighted against the young structurally because old money dominates the economy, because old money dominates government agencies, because old money dominates climate change lobbyists. We heard no response from their side. Let's take Adil's language in consideration. We think that in the status quo, when you say a young person is worth 7 billion and an old person is worth an equal 7 billion, those figures don't mean the same thing on the ground. And we heard no argument from their side against this. I want to talk about two issues. One, how best do we help people? And secondly, how best do we achieve a moral solution? Let's talk about helping people. Notice how in their final speakers, their latest push, a very late one I suggest, was about buy-in. We had several responses to this from the earlier speakers, fortunately. Our first response is this, that it's a massive contradiction. Because listen to their own language. First they tell us in their third speaker that the status quo is okay, that elderly people want to leave behind a legacy. In the very same speech, they said old people will veto policies that are environmentally friendly. So we're not exactly sure what they're referring to. But secondly, I also want to comment that they've never dealt the nuance of our case, that elderly people are willing to support structural long-term changes that also benefit them. The reason why they aren't doing it is because of conditions like learner helplessness that, by the way, another mischaracterization, does not make them malicious, simply makes them politically inactive and unwilling to take the first step. This debate is about whether government should be taking their initiative and taking that first step. Again, nuance dropped all the way from their first speaker. But what did we tell you about effective solutions? We gave you a case that created substantive equality, which is not, by the way, statistical equality, for both old and young people. We talked to you about how these policies are mutually exclusive, because younger generations are uniquely and better positioned to bear risk, capital, and move into areas that are far less known than elderly people. For example, green technology, or structural changes, like forcing diplomatic options to stop forest fires burning beyond our borders. We heard no response again from their side. But let's talk about the second issue, on the moral issue. And here I want to comment again, that even if we take them on their best grounds, even if we take their flawed characterization, that we are somehow prioritizing the young over the old, we're okay with that. Because in the worst case scenario of our side, we still take the moral high ground. We give you 3 structural reasons. Because the older generation is more culpable, there's a mass asymmetry of power, and there's greater responsibility for the state to future generations. Again, 3 structural reasons for why, even on their best case scenario, we take this debate. We heard no nuanced response from their side. Again, I want to be very clear about something. Does this genuinely mean that we think younger generations are innocent? No. We never wanted to make the claim that younger people can be absolved of the crimes against Earth. What we're suggesting is that the current state institutions responsible for statistical calculations do not take into account the fact that very often elderly generations dominate these calculations, that there's an imbalance in the way we're calculating this, we are merely resolving this balance to create substantive equality for both the young and old. Nuance against drop by their side. Does this also mean that we think age should be the only consideration when deciding who to help? No. We simply suggested that we should consider age a bit more equitably. Again, we heard no response from their side. And in all this debate, what have we shown you very conclusively on our side? We've shown you, one, that we redress a fundamental imbalance in the way we approach environmental and economic policy. This, by the way, does not mean we are attempting to ascribe blame to any one party. We are simply saying the metric by which we decide this blame should be a lot more fair. We have no response. But secondly, even if we take them on their best grounds and on their own grounds on helping people both young and old, we suggest the solution moving forward is for structural solutions that can only be achieved by consensus between the old and the young, something that is uniquely exclusive to our side. For all these reasons, I'm very glad to be stepping off this slow-moving train wreck that is climate change.